Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Michal. I'm a PhD student in computational lexicography at Masaryk University in Brno in the Czech Republic. But more importantly, I'm the software engineer who developed or built the European Dictionary portal. Or sometimes I like to think I'm more like the fool who volunteered for the job. And then I ended up, instead of ending up with a simple one-off job to do, I ended up with a complete whole new research program, which will probably stay with me for a big chunk of my future career. So I'll explain later how that happened. So my job here today is to kind of show you the European Dictionary portal, to do an actual on-screen demo. But as well as that, I want to kind of introduce to you, if you're not aware of it yet, I want to introduce to you the kind of the thinking that has been going on in our working group, sort of preceding the building of the portal and following it. So there will be a lot of kind of on-screen demo time, but there will be a lot of kind of time when I'm just talking. So my presentation will kind of come in three parts. First of all, I want to kind of summarize the thinking that was going on in our working group before we decided to actually sit down and get our hands dirty and actually build the portal. This will be relatively short. Then I'm going to do an actual on-screen demo of the portal, show you a bunch of screenshots, and as I'm doing that, I will kind of explain maybe how the portal works behind the scenes. I will talk about how we have established a system where we have people we call curators, and every curator is curating an individual language, and how the portal supports that scenario technically. So this particular thing about how we have created this scheme for curators and curation, that I think is pretty cool. Apart from that, I would say if you haven't seen the European Dictionary portal yet, I would say probably you should prepare to be slightly underwhelmed, because at the end of the day, it is basically just a glorified directory of links to other websites. And that kind of will bring me over to the third section of my talk, to the third part, where I will explain why that slightly underwhelming result has been unavoidable. I mean, the reason for that is that the reason why we haven't been able to build a more sophisticated portal is because European lexicography at the moment is very fragmented, and we don't really have sort of widely recognized, widely respected standards that would allow us to take a lot of different dictionaries that exist out there on the internet and bring them together and connect them to some sort of a single one-screen experience for the end user. So the final part of my talk will be sort of devoted to that, and maybe laying out the plans for what we need to do in the future to make it possible for in the next decade or two for somebody to build a better dictionary portals or sort of applications that aggregate several dictionaries together. So I suppose the overall outcome of the work we have done in Working Group 1, it's not necessarily bad news, not at all. What we have done is we have sort of identified the problem, and we have identified what we think needs to be done so that we can kind of push European lexicography towards its next evolutionary step, which I believe will be sort of aggregating multiple dictionaries into single unified experiences. So in a sense, the portal that we have built, which I could show the first screenshot now, which I'm going to demo shortly, that's not really very important. We built this because we wanted a playground we could experiment with so that we could sort of try out ideas, and this would inspire us to think about things. The bigger outcome is that we have created a new research program, basically, which will keep going for the future, even when this cost action has finished. Okay, so that has been my probably slightly overlong introduction, and now back to the beginning. So the mission of our working group has been to investigate how European dictionaries or the contents of European dictionaries can be integrated or maybe aggregated into some sort of a single screen or single website or single access point kind of a user experience. And as part of that, we decided to build a portal, not because we wanted to create a an amazing final product, but because we wanted kind of a toy that we could experiment with. Yeah. So at first we thought that we would cover what we call scholarly dictionaries, but then later we decided to broaden the definition to make sure that the portal is more useful and more relevant to kind of the general user as opposed to just a specialist linguist user. So that would be my answer to Anna's question about have we attempted to bridge the gap between scholarly dictionaries on the one hand and the general public on the other. I'm not sure if we've bridged it, but we decided to not make it wider anyway, because we decided that our portal is going to be aimed at the general public as opposed to, and will cover sort of lots of different types of dictionaries as opposed to just scholarly dictionaries intended for specialist, very serious academic, basically linguists or researchers in the humanities. And the definition that we've settled on is that our portal will be a dictionary of trustworthy dictionaries. So it'll be a tool that would guide users to high quality dictionaries they can trust. It will be a highly curated portal. So it's not like everything goes in. There are gatekeepers who decide what goes in and what doesn't. I know that that's a kind of dangerous position to put yourself in, but that's a risk we decided we're willing to take. We're going to say these are the dictionaries that are in, these are the dictionaries that are not in, and we think our judgment makes sense. So we have this mission to kind of promote those dictionaries that we believe are trustworthy and high quality, and to maybe kind of direct users towards those, and to maybe kind of counter the trend towards kind of cheapo, low quality clickbait that the internet is full of. Yeah, so the portal looks like this. This would be the homepage. Then you scroll down, you get a list of languages. You can click on one of those languages, and then you get a list of dictionaries in those languages. Our portal, for each dictionary, our portal knows a little metadata about them, and you can use this the filter box on the right-hand side to search our database of dictionaries in many different ways. So the most important pieces of metadata that we have about dictionaries is basically is obviously the languages they describe, the languages they're in. So here we distinguish between two things. We distinguish the object language and the meta language. The object language is the language that the dictionary describes, the language that the dictionary is about in some sense. And then the meta language is the language that the dictionary uses in order to do those explanations, in order to do those descriptions, okay? So obviously, in the case of a monolingual dictionary, those two are the same, but in the case of a bilingual dictionary, there is often, not always, but often it is quite recognizable which language the dictionary is kind of about, and then which the other language is the meta language. So by the way, this means that we are not shying away from bilingual dictionaries in the portal at all. In fact, in some European languages, monolingual lexicography doesn't really exist as such, and even the types of dictionaries that you would describe as normative or scholarly are bilingual. So for that reason alone, if not for other reasons, we decided to be quite generous and to include bilingual dictionaries without fear. So that's what we know. So our portal knows about which languages each dictionary belongs to, and then we also decided to categorize dictionaries in different into what we call genres. So types of dictionaries, things like general dictionaries, historical dictionaries. Dictionaries for specialized language, that includes things like terminological databases and so on, learners' dictionaries, orthographic dictionaries, etymological dictionaries, and so on. So every dictionary is assigned to one or more of these genres, and again, you can use those genres to maybe filter down the list of dictionaries that you're looking at. And then for some of the dictionaries, we know how to send users straight to search results for a particular query. So some of the dictionaries, you will see a little text box and you can just type something into it and just search the dictionary straight away, and it takes you to the dictionary website. But instead of taking you through whatever homepage they have and finding out how to do a search there, it kind of takes you directly to the search results there. Yeah, so that's that. I suppose a more interesting question is, how do we actually decide which dictionaries go in and which don't? Who actually decides that? And how does the portal sort of support that process technically? So as I said, we have, well, before we get to the curators, we have sort of agreed through many painful discussions in a group, we have agreed on a list of criteria for deciding whether a dictionary qualifies for inclusion in the portal or not. We have them published on the website. It is all public. We're like the Centre Pompidou in Paris. We have all the plumbing on the outside. We're not hiding anything. All the internal regulations, all the criteria and things like that. That's all publicly visible. And then the curators that we have are kind of supposed to follow these criteria, but at the same time, the curators are allowed to kind of be generous and to maybe sort of make exceptions every now and then, because sometimes, not all languages are equal, and in some languages, pretty much the only thing that exists are dictionaries that don't always meet all the criteria. So the curators are kind of supposed to use common sense, and each curator in every language is somebody who knows the dictionary landscape in that language, if you will, knows it very well, and knows really what should be included and what shouldn't. So these criteria are kind of like a guide rather than a very strict kind of legislation, right? So we have these criteria. And then we have curators. So curators are basically people who have login names and passwords, and they can log in into the website, and they can sort of go in their own time and sort of change things around, edit the entries for individual dictionaries. So the curator logs in with a name and the password, and they will see these kind of red dots beside the entries. They can click on those, and that will allow them to sort of edit that individual entry. It looks a bit like this. Every dictionary entry here in this portal is basically a small XML document, and sort of they can edit that, and then further down the page there's a button for inserting a new dictionary, and you can delete existing dictionaries and things like that. I need to keep an eye on time. And then we have something called the Curators Manual, which is a pretty long document with lots and lots of screenshots and lots of text, which ideally the curators should read before they do anything. I'm not sure if that's exactly what's always happening. But anyway, so we have this, and again, it's all publicly visible, so anybody who is interested in what we're doing can go in and have a look and understand how we sort of, what we think our mission is and how we work. Then when we decide to add a dictionary to the portal, we typically contact the people who own it, who run it, and we encourage them to put this tiny logo on their own website. So we have this kind of a stamp of approval thing. We encourage dictionary publishers to put this on their website somewhere at the bottom if they want. It's totally optional. And to my surprise, many dictionary publishers have actually done that. And a lot of the traffic that we get, well, most of the traffic that we get to the portal is actually from people who click on these logos on other websites. So I think it's kind of like a mutually beneficial relationship. The dictionary publishers get a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling from having been included in some sort of a European portal, and then they give more kind of, they create more visibility for us as well. Then we have a form that people can fill in to suggest a dictionary to us if they think there's a dictionary out there that should be in the portal, and then that goes into the respective curator, and they can decide whether to include it or not, and things like that. And the last screenshot I want to show, or second to last screenshot, is that this database of dictionaries that we have accumulated so far, it's all available for download under an open source license. So again, that's the kind of the culture of openness that we're cultivating, that all the data is available for free. People can look at it, people can reuse it for whatever other purpose they want. It's all been funded by sort of public money, right? Taxpayers' money. So we think that everything we do should be very open and very, very available to everyone. Yeah. Now, last but not least, the website itself is viewable in 15 languages at the moment. We're always adding more. We're always asking people to give us translations of the user interface. And this now gives me the opportunity to maybe mention a few more kind of statistics. Yeah, so 15 user interface languages. So far we have 228 dictionaries in 50 languages, so that means the object languages, right? 19 curators so far. Some of the curators do more than one language, so it doesn't mean like we only have 19 languages covered, but we do have languages that we don't have curators for yet. The person who is kind of in charge of organizing the curators is Bob Bullhauer over there. So if you want to become a curator for a language, talk to our super curator Bob over there. And yeah, in terms of the traffic that this website gets, so these are the numbers. They are a bit higher from what they were the last time I was talking to at the last ENeL meeting, from the last time I was showing figures to people. They have gone up since then. I would say, on the one hand, you could say that the traffic figures that the website is getting are pretty low. I've worked on a lot of online dictionary projects, and I would say that for a dictionary website to be considered successful, it should be clocking up maybe, let's say, 500,000 searches or page views per month and more. So this is tiny compared to that. But at the same time, I pretty much expected the numbers to be zero or very close to zero. So it has surprised me that there actually is some traffic on the website every day. And this suggests to me that maybe we are onto something. I think that I get the feeling that people would like to have some sort of a unified interface that allows people access to many different sources of lexical data at the same time. We have a huge web of lexical data out there, but it isn't very well interconnected. So that's what I think our portal has kind of partially gone into that area, but we have not met that user need yet at all. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're, with the portal as it is, and it is an experiment, we are basically kind of moving in that direction, and we are beginning to understand a little better what it is that sort of the future of dictionary, of the interaction between humans and dictionaries will look like. There will be a lot more aggregation. In the future, people will not be so excited about going to individual dictionaries one by one, but people will be expecting to be able to sort of access multiple dictionaries at the same time, or multiple sources at the same time. Yeah, so this brings me to the third section of my talk, when I will be basically kind of unfolding to you some of the more futuristic BlueSky thinking that has been inspired by the portal, that has kind of been discussed in our working group. And so I've been talking about how our working group is obsessed with the idea of aggregating multiple dictionaries into one. And so maybe I should put that obsession in a bit of context first. I think that, you know, we live in the world of online dictionaries now. I mean, dictionaries have pretty much completely migrated from paper to screens. Some people, even today, are still kind of awestruck by this, and people would always comment on how amazing it is that you can now search a dictionary in 1.5 seconds instead of having to actually leaf through the physical pages of a book. I mean, yes, that has been a wonderful innovation, but that innovation is now in the past. right? We need to stop obsessing about that, and we need to start looking into the future and start asking ourselves the question, what is the next evolutionary step going to be in the way humans interact with dictionaries? And my feeling is, and I think that many of the working group members agree with me, is that the next step is going to be some sort of aggregation or syndication, or bringing all the different various dictionaries together. And one of the reasons why I think so is that something similar is happening in other industries, or in other sections of the reference industry, if you will. For example, in libraries, in library science, there's a lot of work going on sort of building library portals. You know, libraries usually have machine-readable catalogs, and we are just at this moment, we are seeing an emergence of library portals. These are websites that allow you to search the catalogs of multiple libraries at the same time. Let's say all the libraries in the city where you live, or all the libraries in the country where you live. And then something similar again seems to be happening at the moment in sort of scientific academic publishing, where we are seeing the emergence of something called discovery portals, which are websites which are usually operated by, let's say, an individual university for their own staff and students. And these are websites that allow their users to search multiple sources of sort of publications, data, and things like that that this particular university has access to. So this is definitely happening in the reference industry, but it isn't happening in dictionaries yet. And Google isn't doing that either, because Google is not really a good interface to dictionaries, because not just Google, but sort of generic search engines in general, because they have a couple of problems. For example, they don't really distinguish between searches for actual content and searches for kind of linguistic information. That's the difference between tell me about the word dog and tell me about dogs in general, right? If you search for dog on Google, it'll give you a mixture of dictionaries and other things. So I think there's a call for some sort of a dictionary-specific or lexicon-specific portal, search engine, infrastructure, things like that. Yeah, but the reason why we haven't been able to build one yet, and this one isn't very perfect either, is because, as I was saying, you know, the dictionaries that we have, the dictionaries that we build today, they don't really lend themselves very well to aggregation. Every dictionary website is like a separate island which targets the end user. It's sort of built around the assumption that the user comes to the website and then spends some quality screen time on that particular website, but they don't really support the scenario of aggregation very well. They don't really lend themselves to that sort of thing very well. So I have, over the last maybe 1 or 2 years, developed a couple of ideas, just originating from my work on the portal, and I've discussed them with the working group for what I think we need to do in the near future in order to change that, so that we can build up some sort of an infrastructure on top of which better portals should be built. And this would be a kind of a one-screen summary. First of all, well, I think we need 2 things. We need to create some sort of a standard which would allow us to describe online dictionaries, to tell us what languages they're in, you know, what kind of language they cover. Are these general language dictionaries? Is it a specific special purpose dictionary? What is the expected audience? Is it a dictionary for children? Is it a dictionary for learners? Is it a dictionary for adults? You know, what kind of genre of information you can actually find in that dictionary? Is it mainly a historical dictionary? Is it an etymological dictionary? Is it an orthographical dictionary? But bearing in mind that dictionaries don't always fit neatly in a category, and sometimes dictionary publishers can be deliberately vague about these things, and so on. So we need some sort of a metadata standard for telling us these things about dictionaries, so that we can categorize them better and organize them better in things like in portals and places like that. And we can take a lot of inspiration from the library industry, as I've mentioned, because the library industry is, library science these days is all about metadata standards. They've developed huge, very sophisticated metadata standards, which we can take a lot of inspiration from. Unfortunately, they're not always terribly suited for dictionaries, because dictionaries are special. So I think we need to kind of look for inspiration, but we need to develop something of our own. So that's that. We need a metadata standard for describing dictionaries. And the second thing is we need a protocol that machines could use to access the individual dictionaries. I mean, at the moment, dictionary websites tend to be optimized for people. You go in, you see a search box, you know that that's where you're supposed to type in your query, you do that. Humans understand these sorts of things. But if you want to build a portal which maybe supports kind of a federated search scenario where the portal kind of sends a search request on the user's behalf to the individual users and then collects the responses, then that's very difficult to do because each online dictionary is completely different and you basically need to reverse engineer how they've built it so that you can kind of work with it in an automated way instead of just a human sitting in front of a computer. So again, just to make this doable, workable, we need every dictionary to do these things in pretty much the same way. We need some sort of a standard. And so for that reason, I think we need to create some sort of a machine executable protocol, standardized protocol for talking to online dictionaries and getting results out of them, so that we can send automatically we can send a query to other dictionaries and then get some sort of a response that tells us, yes, I have a match for this search, and no, I don't have a match for this search, and these are the headwords that correspond to your search query, and so on, and so that we can do all of this automatically. Nothing like that currently exists in our industry, but again, we can look into other industries where similar things do exist. There's a lot of stuff going on the web in general when it comes to sort of search technologies or aggregating search engines together. There's something called OpenSearch, which is basically a standard for creating small plugins for search engine that you can plug them into your web browser, and then you can kind of do searches a lot more quickly that way. Yeah, there's something called XML sitemaps, which is basically like a machine-readable description of what a website contains, which search engines like Google and so on can use and do use to kind of understand a website so that they can index it better. So we can take a lot of inspiration from these things and apply them to this specific genre, which is dictionary websites. I think there's a lot of potential there for innovation. And once we've done those things, then we will be able to build wonderful portals and other applications that kind of sit on top of this wonderful diversity of many different dictionaries and different types of lexical data that we have around the internet, and kind of bring them together in a way that sort of makes sense to the end user. What we don't want is to create just another standard for exchanging lexical data. We have a lot of those out there already, and people are not really using them very much. I mean, in the early stages of the European Dictionary Portal project, the thinking was that we have to persuade/force all the different dictionary publishers to give us their data in machine-readable formats, so that we can pour it all into a big database and then sort of basically display their content on our website. But I know from experience the dictionary publishers are extremely allergic to suggestions like this, because it basically asks them to give their data away and to kind of not get a lot of credit for that. I mean, obviously commercial dictionary publishers are totally against that, but not only them, even publicly funded sort of public service dictionary projects tend to be allergic to such suggestions as well, because what they basically want is they want to bring people to their own websites, because this is important to them, okay? They need to build up awareness. When they go asking for the next round of funding, they need to be able to show that this and this website has been getting so and so much of traffic, that they are actually providing a service that the people want, and so on. So for that, they just want to have their own websites, their own identities. It's very important, and we cannot ignore this. So any kind of infrastructure that we want to build, so that we can build portals on top of that, that needs to respect that, okay? Because otherwise it will not be adopted. So for that reason, I think that what we want to build is an infrastructure which is based on freely exchanging metadata rather than the actual data. Okay, we are not going to be asking dictionary publishers to give us their data for free, all of the complete contents of all the individual entries. We just want them to tell us metadata about themselves, what headwords they have, do they have usage examples, do they have pronunciation or not, what kinds of users are they intended for, what do I have to do to send them a search request, what do I have to do to understand the response, and so on. But in the end, all of this should culminate in the redirection of a human user to that dictionary publisher's website, which is where they actually go to actually look at the actual data they were looking for. So what I'm proposing is a metadata kind of an infrastructure rather than just another standard for data exchange, which people wouldn't use. And once we have those things, we will be able to, build wonderful applications, not just portals, but things like various plugins for browsers and ebook readers and things like that, so that whenever you're doing something, reading, writing, and you need access to lexical data, lexical information, you will be able to do that easily, and you will be able to do that on top of the entire web of lexical data that we have out there, not just the 1 or 2 dictionaries that you happen to have installed on your ebook reader. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I wanted to say today. I just want to say that I'm sorry, Chris, for stealing the title of your presentation, but the temptation was too big. This was an election slogan in Ireland in 2002, and it's acquired a life of its own. But I think it's very appropriate for this occasion because, the cost action is finishing up, but we have created a new research program. We have discovered an area of applied research where we can do some good. We can develop these ideas into something more concrete. I've decided to adopt this as just one sub-project within my PhD research for the next couple of years, and I will be working with a lot of the people I got to know through the cost action here. So I think this is actually a very good result for a cost action. This is what cost actions are supposed to do, right? To sort of get people to talk to each other and develop ideas so that they can then go on and do something more specific, more practical. So I think we can congratulate ourselves on having ended up in exactly that position. So it's the end of the cost action, but it's really the beginning of the road for a lot of other things. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michal. Yeah, we have questions instantly or comments. Thomas, this microphone doesn't work. It doesn't. It will. There's another one. Maybe better luck with that one. Yeah, that one.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was very, very interesting. I absolutely don't agree with you about kind of pursuing only this super portalization of lexicography rather than insisting on exchanging data. But I don't even want to ask about that because that's a too long and that would be a long and complex discussion. So we won't go.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we won't go into that. But what I do and what I'm truly interested in is why do you think that it will be easier to convince publishers to give you all these things that you want? Metadata, the dictionaries, etc., that's fine. But lemma lists, things like do you have examples, etc.? I mean, because even that is sensitive for somebody who is a commercial publisher or an old-fashioned Academy of Sciences who doesn't want to give out data. So why are you convinced or optimistic that will actually work?
I'm optimistic because Google has done it already in the general web kind of landscape, and general search engines have done it already. Basically everybody in the world is giving everything away for free to Google. Google is always harvesting everything and using it for whatever it is that they're using it for. And most of the time, website publishers don't really object or don't object too loudly. I mean, sometimes they do, in especially in certain sectors. But I think the world has come to an equilibrium where people understand that there is a mutual benefit, that we allow these aggregators such as Google or in the future us to collect our stuff. And we know that they're not going to kind of just basically republish everything and we lose all of our audience, you know. So, and on the other hand, if we kind of moderate our demands, if we kind of ask not for data but for metadata only, then again, I'm not saying it will be easy to convince them, but it will be easier. And so those are the reasons why I'm more optimistic than just asking everybody to share data and getting nothing. Yeah, I know it's we can talk about it over beer later, but yeah.
I won't go into a technical discussion. I would never have considered aggregating data because you've always have matters of version issues, updates, and that would have taken a lot of time. I was wondering why you would need a lemma list. If I think of the Clarin solution for federated content search, there is not a lemma list of index corpora there. So have you considered looking into the Clarin direction, federated content search,
Yes,
the metadata scheme over there, and adapt and trying to
yeah, well,
I mean,
it's
that idea?
Yeah, it's not a very important part of my story that we should have lemma lists from all the dictionaries. That's not important. That may not actually be what we want in the future. But I mean, broadly speaking, there are kind of two patterns of doing kind of aggregation that people do, let's say, in the library area. There's either what people call federated search, when you just get a search request from the user and then you actually physically send it to all the individual places and then get responses back. And then that's what people usually call federated search. And then there's this meta search paradigm where you kind of beforehand you harvest all the metadata and then you store them in your own local database, and then when people search for things, you just search your local index instead of sending individual queries to individual places. And then you need to worry about having always the most up-to-date version and things like that. And for that scenario, you probably need sort of things like lemma list and things like that. But I mean, this is early thinking. I'm not sure. If it turns out that we can't really persuade enough dictionary publishers to give us lemma lists, then again, what's the point of having a standard for that if people aren't using it? So, I mean, this is just the point at which we list all the different possibilities. I'm not saying that I'm committed to anything in particular. Yeah.
Can I ask one other question? What about the PR campaign? Because it's a really nice website and there's a limited amount of visitors, but I think we need more publicity, more dissemination, getting it into the world to reach the larger community. And maybe I'm not too active on Twitter or anywhere else, but I've kind of missed that. Is there a reason for that?
Probably isn't, other than incompetence and laziness on our part. But I'm not too worried about that. I look at the portal that we have built as an experiment, as a kind of a proof of concept. Once we have built up all this wonderful infrastructure that I've been dreaming up lately, and then we can sort of build portals that are more immediately, more obviously useful. And that will be the point when you will build it and they will come. You disagree, yeah, okay. Well, you need to tweet more then, yeah.
Alex?
Alex Geiken from the old-fashioned Academy of Sciences. So I liked your suggestion a lot about the possibility of creating metadata standards for dictionary information. So my metaphor is not to create something that is close to the Clarin federated content search, but rather to the Virtual Language Observatory. And what is behind there is a standard of metadata fields that should be inside, well, any dictionary, starting with a lemma list. Of course, you can debate if you would give away a lemma list, but we at the Academy, we give away our lemma lists, And other portals are taking advantage of this because it makes life for them much easier. So I think the time for sharing lemma lists is better than, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Other things are, and there I would like to know if you have some closer ideas. You might have other well-known lexicographic fields. For example, is there information about pronunciation, about grammar, about word formation? Is there a sense definition? Are there examples? So these would be possible metadata fields worth exploring, and I was wondering if in your pragmatic approach you have some ideas about that.
Not any more specific than what you have just outlined, yeah, but I agree that it's important and useful to be able to describe these things about individual dictionaries in a machine-readable way, yeah, but I'm not aware of any existing scheme or standard for doing these things,
So,
which is bad, but that's an opportunity as well, so.
well, at least concerning our project, wouldn't be a problem to provide an API with this kind of information. So if there are more than one project who are willing to do this,
excellent.
be a starting
Yes,
point.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Anything we do in the future, we will need sort of lots of different dictionaries in lots of different languages to chip in to kind of to show to the world that this actually works, right? So yeah.
Thank you, Michal, for a very interesting presentation. You refer to the success the library sector has with their, let's say, more or less universal way they build.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, more or less, indeed. But they do have a universal classification code, the UDC code, which helps a lot. The same holds for the building of a thesaurus. They have the ISO standard, 25964. And for terminology databases, you have also an ISO standard. The Bible is the 704.
Yeah.
So do you think there is a need to also look into more standardization?
Yeah, well, I mean, in lexicography, you have these standards too. I mean, there's an ISO standard for lexicographic data, which is the Lexical Markup Framework, LMF, but that's, on my previous slide, that's just another data exchange format that people don't really use for what it is intended for exchanging data. So, yeah, but yeah, we have wonderful data schemes and standards out there which are great. Lots of thinking has gone into them, but they're not really being used for kind of sharing data openly. So that is basically the problem. Yeah. Sorry, does that answer what you meant?
Well, in the other fields, there is a distinction between, let's say, a data exchange standard, such as the TBX standard for software companies who want to exchange terminology and that kind of databases.
Yes.
And TBX indeed also is a problem. Not everybody's using it, and it's still complicated to share data in this way. But apart from the TBX standard, you also have standards that tell people how to build a dictionary.
That's
and
true, yes.
it's more like the lemmas, the fields, and so on. I know there is many dictionary builders will, cherish their academic freedom in order to build whatever construction they want. But still, if you have a standard for that, then it might help to get it more unified.
Well, I'm not sure if, just from my own personal experience, designing a dictionary from scratch that's the time when you look at standards and take inspiration from them, but you don't really follow them to the letter. Or that's what I do anyway. And I know that the question of data exchange is a lot more developed and a lot more kind of standardized and regimented in terminology, because just the need to exchange data occurs more often there. It's not nearly as highly developed as that in lexicography as opposed to terminology. But then again, this is all about exchanging the data, not about the metadata, right? I really want to kind of move away from the frame of thinking that we should always be exchanging the actual raw data. Instead, I'm just happy to skim the surface a bit and just see the metadata. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much again, Michal, and thank you for your input.